What is up, guys? You're listening to SportsBiz with Rashad. Let's get started with today's episode. What's good? Welcome back. Another episode today, and actually it's going to be our final interview of 2020. Not sure if I'm going to do another episode yet to kind of wrap up the first season, but either way, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's taken the time to listen, leave a review, leave feedback on the podcast so far. And then obviously I had to end off this year with a bang. So joining me is the manager of business analytics for the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, and also a fellow Canadian, Armaan Ahluwalia. Now, Armaan is going to come on and share his unique journey, just kind of going from Winnipeg to Halifax to San Diego and eventually to Kansas City. And if you enjoy listening to Armaan, definitely check out his new podcast, which is, I'm pretty sure it's also available on all platforms as well. It's called Sports Business Strategy, and he gives great insights into that kind of niche industry that you don't really hear much about. So with that being said, welcome Armaan. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to get to know a little bit more about you and your background, and just excited for the conversation. So let's get right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and just kind of your journey so far?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So originally born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, went to the University of Dalhousie in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I always knew I wanted to kind of go away and kind of provide a different experience from an education perspective. I had some family out there, so that made it a little bit easier. When I was at Dal, I essentially knew that I wanted to work in sports and kind of found my way to the Dalhousie Gazette, which was the university paper there, and somehow the sports team, sports section took me on as a lost cause with someone who couldn't write very well, and they were fortunate enough to be nice and kind of offer me opportunities to cover the soccer team or cover the basketball team. And at that time, I found a real kind of passion for the covering the basketball team. During their AUS, which is Atlantic University Sport, run through the tournament and then to the CIS. I know it's changed to U Sports now, but the CIS Final Eight essentially, which was in Halifax. And so I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to cover it there. And then when I was there, I met some people from a website called NorthPoleHoops.com, which back in 2011 or 2012 were just starting out more or less. And then from there, got to work for North Pole Hoops, kind of scouting and covering basketball in Manitoba and Nova Scotia, depending on the time of year I was. And from that was kind of my intro into sports. And upon graduation at Dalhousie, I came back to Winnipeg and I got an opportunity to work for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the food and beverage side. So there was a company named Ovations. It's now become Spectra. And they basically needed someone to manage the suite level on game days. And so I managed a team of about 20 servers and 5 or 10 runners and busboys and whatnot, and basically provided service to the suite level from the food and beverage perspective. It was a disappointing year on the field, which made our job a little bit harder. But upon completion of 1 year of that, I went to San Diego State and I got my MBA with a focus in sports business. And from there, I had to do an internship. And so I ended up doing an internship with the Kansas City Chiefs. I figured I would go back to Canada, but the opportunity here made itself available, and I took it and I jumped at it. And 5 weeks on, I was hired as a full-time employee. And so since 2015 in January or March is when I started full-time, I've been with the Kansas City Chiefs.
So kind of a quick turnaround after you went to San Diego there.
Yeah, so part of the program is it's an accelerated MBA program, and so it is about 18 months from start to finish. So the first year of it in 2014, when I went down, was essentially classes, kind of full time, very high level, kind of 6 or 7 classes at a time, depending on the time of year. And then there's a 6 month internship program required where you do a big thesis essentially in a big paper. And so usually it comes with an internship, but I managed to turn my internship into a full-time opportunity, which was really great. And so did that for up until 2015 July. And then after that, I officially graduated.
Yeah, that's sounds like a good program. I've definitely heard of it, and it's one I was looking at kind of after my undergrad degree. Now, you mentioned that you grew up in Winnipeg, but you went to Dal on basically the other side of Canada. What kind of drew you to that program?
Well, I think this is kind of where I kind of come out as a little bit more of a geek. I mean, growing up, I was a huge fan of This Hour Has 22 Minutes. It's a Halifax show based or Halifax based show, but they always used to talk about the top universities, and that was one of the segments every year. Maclean's magazine would put out a
Yeah.
rankings for the top universities, and so I always looked at that, and I thought I wanted to one go away to kind of learn and kind of grow and understand myself more and kind of develop as a person. And two, Dalhousie was one of those universities that was kind of in the top echelon, and for me, that always seemed like an attainable goal, and there would always be some family support nearby, and I figured it was kind of a match made in heaven. It turned out to be a great opportunity for me and a great choice.
Yeah, and then after that, you kind of jump back to the other side of the continent there into San Diego. Now, I know you mentioned kind of how that journey worked, but how did you find it? I guess more on the logistics side, with just dealing with moving countries, dealing with dating life, like all that kind of outside stuff that you don't think about.
Yeah, no, I think, I've, and maybe this has impacted me currently in how I think about things, but, moving around, it doesn't seem as bad in principle until you actually do it. And then, for example, moving to the States, right? The DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, is a very complicated as they make it out to be, and there's lots of forms. And so, as somebody who was a graduate student, I had to get I had to get a brand new license here in Kansas City. Something that I'd been driving for almost 8-10 years of my life. I had to go and retake a test, and so what's funny is that I was standing behind somebody in line who was half of my age, and I was like, I've been driving for almost half of your life, and I have to take the same test just like you. We're all the same here. So yeah, I mean, there's small
Yeah.
things like that logistically have been difficult, but you learn to get over them. I mean, I think in general, right? It's always on the front end of things when you're getting used to, you're getting settled, right? Getting a driver's license, making sure you can, have all the proper forms and documentation. It can be quite a bit, right? Obviously with the visa situation, that also makes it another hurdle to overcome as well. But all in all, it's obviously been worth it, and the experiences I've had here have totally outweighed the heartache and the moving and flying to certain places. I mean, I remember I flew to San Diego back in 2014 with essentially two big suitcases with as much clothes as I could fit in there, and you kind of start from scratch. And so that was something that I've always kind of been able to do, and found ways to improve that process to make it a little bit less burdensome every time I've made a move.
Yeah, so I guess it's just figuring out all the little things first and making sure you're ready to go, and it's not as bad as it, or it's not as difficult as it seems once you get used to it, type thing.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, once you kind of build a rhythm and a routine, it makes it very easy.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, my dog has entered the room here, making
Oh,
making
no
making a
worries.
fuss. So I apologize. But no, I think it's one of those things that once you kind of build a routine and build a rhythm, you find out what works and you find out what doesn't. Right? I think that's all about adapting and adjusting moving forward.
Yeah, and specifically for the San Diego program. Now, I know there's a few different top programs. There's Ohio, there's UMass, and there's a few others. What kind of drew you to San Diego, and how did you find that program experience?
Yeah, so I think for me, San Diego State was one that I had found through just a simple Google search. But for what kind of drew it to me was the ability to meet other Canadians who were in the program, more or less. And I got to know one of them fairly well, who had just graduated when I went down, sorry, for a visit. And so for me, it was the small cohort of it was really appealing, and the ability to kind of finish within 18 months rather than taking 2 years seemed appealing to me. And so from that point on, I was kind of hooked. And when I went down to San Diego, I mean, obviously the weather is always extremely favorable to the point where I stopped checking the weather. So that was another huge, a nice draw too as well.
Yeah, 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 that makes sense. All those comparisons you have to do, and the weather is a big factor because I know in Ohio and in UMass, it's not as warm as San Diego, obviously.
It is definitely an added benefit, for sure.
Now, kind of transitioning into the next question here, in your free time, what have you done to kind of further your career and personal brand kind of outside of school? And I know you just started a podcast, so maybe if you want to talk about your goals for that and what your plans are.
Yeah, so I think for me, I mean, I think outside of work, I'm a huge sports fan and have always followed kind of sports, from an on field perspective my whole life. But I think for me now, I've always looked at the business side even more under the microscope, in the sense that I've always got my eye on it. I can't go to a sporting event now and not look at what sponsors are activating and who is doing what and spending in what category. And so I think that's kind of affected my ability to go to a sporting event now. But yeah, you mentioned the podcast. Yeah, I've recently started a podcast with my co-host, Will Item from the Oklahoma City Thunder. We got connected through a networking event here during COVID, essentially. And we kind of hit it off, and we kind of heard about each other through the industry. Kind of what we do is very niche. And so we kind of had this idea about starting a podcast and being a little bit more niche, right? Our goal isn't to reach the masses, and then obviously if it does, that would be great. But I think for us, we want to highlight kind of the strategic side of sports business, and the podcast is called Sports Business Strategy. But for us, it's a little bit more of talking to leaders in the industry, specifically in the sports strategy in the business strategy space. Sorry, to kind of highlight different things that they're working on and different things that they're working to improve, right? Whether that be measurement or, better way of finding new prospects, different ways to use data to make better decisions, right? And I think that's something that is a growing field, and we've been excited so far with the response. Albeit, you got to start somewhere, and we figured this is no better time to do it, just like what you're doing right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's definitely a very niche type of podcasts, and I've listened to the first couple episodes you guys have out, and it's pretty good so far. I enjoy any kind of sports business podcast, but I haven't heard, or I haven't actually even seen one specifically focused on the strategy side of things. So it's a kind of cool it's kind of a cool way to think about things. Now, working in a professional sports team's business department,
Mhm.
how would you say that kind of differs from working in the business department of another industry?
Yeah, I think for me, right, I work in the corporate partnerships and suites department. So a lot of what we do is very focused on, highlighting new prospects, turning them into currents, helping them kind of grow their business through different initiatives, right? So while there are other departments that have partnerships, for example, your Postmates has a partnership department. Now those partnerships are a little bit different. Those might be different vendors that they can use. Whereas for us, it's finding different brands that we can help and create a business solution for them to use the different assets and different abilities and objectives that we have to further their objectives, right? Whether that's brand awareness, lead generation, hospitality, recruitment, all those different things. We try to find solutions to those problems. And so I think for us, we have a very appealing brand, right? The Chiefs are just like the NFL is a very appealing brand that provides a lot of eyeballs in many different ways to different consumers and ideal target demos. So in that sense, it's a different conversation than probably someone in a different industry but a similar position would have to think about.
Right, and I guess it does help that the Chiefs are playing well right now. So
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, of course, it doesn't hurt at all. But at some point, the NFL is very cyclical, right? Top teams become bottom teams, and bottom teams become top teams. And for the most
yep.
part, I think one of the things that the minor leagues do very well is that they focus on everything outside of the lines, right? They only control what they can control, and so they want everyone to have a great experience, have a great time. And so I think about that as we're doing the same thing, right? I mean, obviously there will be a point in the future where the Chiefs won't have a winning season, right? And at that point, we
Right.
want to make sure that we've developed a strong enough fan base to then support that. And the Chiefs Kingdom, which is what our fan base is called, is extremely strong, especially during those years from 2010 to 2014, where 2008 to 2013, where before Coach Reed came, it wasn't as strong. And so we're very fortunate to be in these times, but also remembering that not everything is always going to be rosy, that we have to be prepared for downtimes. But as long as we can continue to develop great projects, great programs, great things, our fan base will be able to help us kind of weather those potentially down years in the future, should they come.
Right. Yeah, that all makes sense. What are your favorite parts of working for the Chiefs, I guess, and what are your kind of end goals for your career, whether that's staying in sports or do you have kind of other aspirations that you want to pursue outside of sports?
Yeah, so I think working for the Chiefs is a great opportunity. I mean, it's been a lifelong goal to be in the NFL, and I was very fortunate to have that opportunity very, very early on in my career, and still have that opportunity in my career. Right, I think it's a tough industry to get into, specifically the NFL. Also being a Canadian too, as well. But yeah, I think working at the Chiefs is a great opportunity for me. What makes it so great is the people. I'm very fortunate to work with some amazing people, and I've had some amazing bosses over my time here, in the sense that they're not just good people, they're almost friends and have become lifelong friends, in that sense that even if they have moved on, that I've still maintained a strong relationship with them, just because of all the time that we've spent together. As obviously working in sports, there are those days where you work very, very long hours on game days, or in preparation for game day. But again, the people are really great. The culture is really great. I think it's a lot of the Midwest values that are kind of coming through in the organization. And on top of that, it's very similar to where I grew up, which is why I like Kansas City so much. Your second question was tied to, what do I want to do for my career? I think for me, I'm not sure where my career will take me. I'm very early on in my career. I'm very fortunate to be in a great position and have a lot of impact in the role that I do. I would
Yeah.
like to think that I would stay in sports for the entirety of my career. I think it's something I'm very passionate about. I really, really enjoy thinking about using the sports industry to further different opportunities for businesses. And so, that day may end at some point, right? At some point, it will end. Obviously, I will retire, but I hope that I do get to spend a majority, if not all, of my career in the sports industry, or some way touching or involved or at arm's length of the sports industry.
Yeah, and you didn't mention in there at all about your Super Bowl experience, and I know you got participated in the Super Bowl kind of parade this past year, I guess. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to, prior to my Chiefs history working for the team, I actually did get a chance to go to a Super Bowl. I went to the San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl in New Orleans. So
Okay.
fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which fandom you are, I've actually been at both of the San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl losses. Actually, not both. They're the only Super Bowl losses that the 49ers have had. I've been at both of them, and those are the only Super Bowls I've been to. So any team playing the 49ers in the future, I'm available for hire to come to the game to help the luck. But
Well, I'm actually a Seattle fan, so I'm okay with
there you
that.
go. There you go. So, no, again, the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl this past year was beyond incredible. The Hunt family was extremely generous with their ability to not only provide opportunities to go to the game, hospitality, transportation, but only that, to be able to bring my spouse as well too. I was able to bring my wife, which was an incredible experience for her, for myself, and then there was an opportunity to purchase certain things at face value. So I took that upon myself to try to bring my mom and her fiance down to the game, as they've done so much for me in my uh, you know in my career, in my life. My mom has been an incredible role model for me, and has been my biggest supporter out throughout that. So for me, be able to take care of her, to come to a game where she's become a massive sports fan all of a sudden, now that I've been with the team, and watches every game religiously on Sunday, which is a very, very cool thing for me to have my mom as
For
one of my
sure.
biggest fans. So the Super Bowl was great. I'm dragging on here. The parade was awesome. It was really, I think for me, just getting to the Super Bowl was the Super Bowl itself, in the sense that everybody had worked so hard over the years to get so close, and then to finally get there after 50 years of not going, for the city for the people that work there meant the world to me.
Sounds like a really good experience then.
If every NFL team could go once every couple of years, I think that would be great, because it's such an incredible experience, and I want other people to experience how incredible. Now, selfishly, I would love the Chiefs to go every year, right? But
Yeah.
it is something that this is why you get in sports. You get in sports to go and be able to play in the big game and ultimately win it.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's good. It's a good moment, and definitely uh kind of good for you that you got to get into a winning organization like that so quickly, and have that opportunity to experience the Super Bowl firsthand. Now, last couple of questions for
Mhm.
you, kind of some more fun questions. First one is, what about strategy and analytics kind of gets you out of bed every morning and excited for work?
Yeah, I think for me, it's that there's always a problem to solve, and there's no correct answer. I love solving problems that have no correct answer, and that they're abstract, or that they're very difficult or challenging. And so that for me is what gets me up and really excited about what I do.
Yeah, so you can kind of get the creative side out of
Hmm.
you, but also the analytic backgrounds and the numbers and the data and all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so last question is a question I asked almost every guest, but it's, what's your best advice for someone that's trying to break into the sports industry? You've been able to get in there pretty quickly, so you must have some good tips to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was in undergrad, I really didn't know I wanted to be in the sports industry. It's
Yeah.
only come as of late, but I will say, like for me, I think two things are very kind of reminiscent. When I think about what's got me to where I am, I think about timing is everything, right? And obviously, this is an unusual time, and timing is really crucial. And I think you make your own luck in that way. But on the other side, I say like networking is super important, right? The ability to network with people and to be proactive about it, either professionally or personally, can pay dividends in the long run, right? And I think the industry is very close knit, and almost everyone knows everyone to a certain extent, or knows of people. And I think that's one of the things that makes this industry so great, is that you can kind of network with anybody, and it's a great ability to try to get to know people who are really, they have great stories as well too. So networking is super important, and then timing is everything, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. Definitely the timing
Hmm.
aspect. Sometimes you just got to get a little lucky with your timing. So that's a good one. So yeah, that's really all the questions I had for you. If any of you guys want to check out Armand's podcast, it's Sports Business Strategy. I'm assuming you have it available kind of on all
We
platforms.
do, we do. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, wherever you listen to podcasts, you should be able to find it.
Perfect. Yeah. So definitely check that out, and you'll get some great insights out of Armand and his co-host. Now, just wanted to say huge thanks for coming on, and just kind of talking about your experience. I know it's definitely more relatable for me because you are a Canadian who made it to the NFL, and there's not a lot of those, so it's always good to get some insights on someone who has done that, as I try to kind of do the same over the next few years.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. This was fun, and there aren't many Canadians in the NFL, but whenever there are, we get to know each other pretty quickly.
And that wraps up this episode of Sports Biz with Rashad. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed, be sure to check us out on Instagram at SportsBiz with Rashad, and support us on all other platforms. I'll catch you guys on the next episode.